The year was 2006. Paul Martin from the Liberal Party lost to Stephen Harper of the Conservatives for the Canadian Parliament. At that time, George W. Bush was thought to be the worst Republican president, but history would soon prove him wrong a decade later. The month was April. The day was the 28th. RV was the highest grossing movie of the day, with Stick It following right behind it. 5 members of the U.S. Congress were arrested outside of Sundane Embassy, Washington, D.C. for protesting the Darfur genocide. Steve Howe passed away. No, not that Steve Howe. This Steve Howe. Yes, he passed away. James Blunt's You're Beautiful was dominating the music charts, but a black cloud was coming the horizon with Daniel Powter's Bad Day. Luckily, there was something even more beautiful right around the corner, the last album Tool would put out for over a decade. 10,000 Days by Tool. So Tool really doesn't need any introduction. They are a US post-grunge, post-metal. They're very big on experimentation, very big on longer stretches of music, very complex compositions within their musical stylings. And with each album, it took longer and longer and longer to produce, much like a Kubrick movie. And I think Kubrick would be a great, comparison when we're looking at the two. Like, both are very meticulously thought out, both are very perfect within their essence, and both kind of tackle a dehumanization. But we come to the last album that they have put out to date, which is 10,000 Days. And 10,000 Days has been the #1 most requested album for me to look at. So here I am talking about 10,000 Days and my own take on it. So from the gates, I'm going to say that Lateralis is my favorite album from the band. But 10,000 Days is probably their best album in terms of concept, composition, and execution. Within each song, it is very, very polished. I want to talk about the structure first before I get too far into this review. I really enjoy the structure of this album in that it almost feels like there are 4 faces on this. We have the first 2 tracks, Vicarious and JAMBI, taking up the first quarter. Then we have the Wings for Mary suite, Wings for Mary Part 1, and then 10,000 Days, Wings for Mary Part 2. That takes up the second quarter. The third quarter is taken up by the Pot, the Lipin Conjuring, and the Lost Keys, and then followed up with Rosetta Stone. And I feel like with the Conjuring, the Lipin Conjuring, Lost Keys, and Rosetta Stone being very similar to like the Triad trilogy that we had with Lateralis, like each one kind of blends into one another. The final quarter, the final kind of piece on this is the Intention, Right Into, and then the final track of Vincenni's Tress. And so each one kind of tackles a different concept and a different thing. My biggest gripe, though, with this album, because I kind of want to get it out of the way, are 3 of the songs are almost carbon copies of one another. Vicarious, JAMBI, and Right Into, even to a certain extent, The Pot. These 4 songs feel very, very similar in what they're trying to do. They introduce you with a concept, it takes you through the movements, it's a very Tool song, almost like a traditional Tool song, and then we have kind of a bridge with a guitar kind of lick throughout it, and then we finally have a reprise. And so these 4 tracks do the same thing, and I'm surprised that Tool wanted to do this so many times, and I didn't know if it really worked within the concept of maybe like the different layerings, because I know within the layerings, that is a concept that is found within this album. And I think out of all of these, my favorite one is JAMBI. Just with the interlude that we have in the midpoint, I think what they do with the experimentation of the guitars works a lot better than what we had with Vicarious, The Pot, or Right Into. So besides that, this album is quite beautiful. The compositions and the complex time signatures are very apparent. Vicarious and JAMBI being very good examples of this, and the two feel almost mirror image of one another. They feel very similar. When we get into Wings for Mary Part 1 and 2, these songs are again, almost carbon copies of one another, taking through the gradual build to the inevitable like climax that we have, and the climax is the same for both. And the difference is Wings Part 1 is half the length of Wings Part 2. And Wings Part 2 really develops it. Like, it really starts off slow and takes its time to build. So when you get to that final track, it feels very much like a bigger payoff. And I love the bass line when we get to the first plateau of this song. And I remember speaking with one of my friends about this album, and we both agreed that Lateralis kind of transcend music from where they were in their career. Up to that point, they were very angsty and very, like, raging against the machine. And they kind of left that behind within Lateralis. And they, again, almost kind of transcended that. And when we got to 10,000 Days, it felt like they had returned a little bit to that, and the pot feels like that, you know, kind of repeating this, you must be high, you've got to be high, you've got to be wrong, you got to not be in your right mind. But that concept plays perfectly within the next 3 or 4 songs, with Rosetta Stone being this patient that's on this bed with no identification, no clothes, nothing, just being there and being picked up by these aliens and these extra like dimensional beings. And I almost wonder if those beings are what capped off Lateralis. You know, it's an interesting kind of thought period with having so many things being connected within Tool's albums. There's probably some connection there. And just where the story takes place, it's just a mind trip from start to finish. Like, the song never sits still, and it's always moving from start to finish. And I really love that, like, no holds bars, just grab on and hope that you're hanging on for the entire ride. I do feel like this song does kind of peter out by the end, and the false ending doesn't really play too much for the song's advantage. Like, I almost wish that it was more crazy and just more over the top, almost like a Mars Volta song near the end, because the song started off so strong, but near the end it did kind of peter out a little bit. Now, unfortunately as well, the album does kind of end on a very interesting note. At this point in the album, after Rosetta Stone, I feel like almost the album should have stopped here, but with the last few tracks of Intention and Right Into, it feels almost tacked on at the end, especially with Intention being such a long and slow burning song. Like, I feel like Intention is much more of a kind of a prelude to Right Into, so it's kind of a slog to get through to Right Into, because Right Into is much more of a powerhouse song as we had within Vicarious and JAMBI. But Right Into is a beautiful song, and I love that kind of drive that it has. It's got that rock and bass line that we're so akin to, with the playing of the guitars all over it. And Minor's singing on this probably is my favorite throughout the whole album. And then the song just kind of ends with Vingeni being like this really strange, almost like godlike entity just breathing and talking, and it's almost like that main artwork like breathing out and talking to us, as though we have reached some kind of a higher plane. But with Right Into being the catalyst for that, it doesn't quite hit me. Now, I know throughout this entire review I've been talking a lot about the negatives and how it hasn't quite landed so well. But one thing that I want to talk about is the brilliance of the music that is found on here. As I said at the beginning, this is probably their best composition and best orchestrated album out of the bunch from Tool. It's so like meticulously thought out and just placed perfectly here. Like, there's no note that's really out of sync. Even though the pacing is a little bit off at times, especially near the end, everything leading up to that ending still provides a fantastic drive and a fantastic outlook throughout the entire album. Overall, I still really enjoy this album. As I said, it's probably their best, but it's not my favorite. This is an album that you definitely have to have in your collection. If you can find it on physical format, definitely do so. This is one that you need to hear in its CD form, because the jacket and the CD, like that bifocal 3D thing that they had with this album begs to be incorporated within the musical listening experience. So that's about it for 10,000 Days by Tool. I know you guys have been waiting for this one for a long time, so what did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know of your own comments about this album and your experiences with it down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been another one of the series of requests. And because this album has been requested so much, what I'm doing is I'm taking requests. So please leave your requests down below. And what I've actually done is I have taken all the requests that I've had up to this point that I haven't been able to get to in this hat. So I've written them down, and I'm going to pull one out randomly to see which one I'm doing next. And the next one that I'm doing, I pulled it out here, will be Posthumous Silence by Slyvan. So thank you so much for recommending that one. I will be listening to that one, and I'll have that one up in a couple of weeks. I'll also be taking any of the requests that I find down below, adding them to the hat, and I'll be drawing that one out, and I'll be reviewing that album next. So, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. Oh, I also want to remind everybody I'm going to be doing a live listening party. This will be an album that I listen to at the end of July. So it'll be July 31st. It's a Tuesday. I'm going to be doing it at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to listen to an album, comment about it. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of a discussion, and we'll talk about certain movements and what they mean and just things that I love about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.